Sheikh Mohammed always had that essence, the essence you see today, the essence that made him the youngest Minister of Defence in the world, the essence that allowed him to go through Mons, through that tough training. That essence was there.
From the very start, showed that he was slightly different from the rest.
His upbringing in Dubai was very helpful.
It was very character building.
Without a doubt.
Were you born a leader or do you become a leader? In his case, it's probably both.
He was a tough young man, straightforward.
And he's a man who doesn't give up.
It's in his blood, that's all I would say.
What he's done speaks for itself.
It's spectacular.
An exceptional young man.
We're talking about 60 years ago. Officer Cadet Mohammed Rashid, we knew he was going to have a position of importance. But the whole point about Mons was that you trained everybody the same. It didn't matter whether they were chap up there or chap down there.
The British political agent came with a warning for Sheikh Rashid. He said, going to Mons is like going to prison. It's that tough. And Sheikh Rashid turned to the British political resident and laughed. And his response was, don't worry, Mohammed will endure.
It was a very physical 6 months. There were a lot of blisters. They were taught how to deal with them, and he did it with everybody else. They'd be dropped off a truck and told find their way back to camp, and we all went to bed and forgot about them. But it was highly illegal. I certainly went to bed.
Well, history would dictate that it's not because you are the son of whoever, does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that you're going to be a success. Sheikh Mohammed, coming from Dubai, he cannot have done what he's done without having some pretty strong leadership abilities. But he's obviously got it.
It was like a crammer. He was push, 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 push the whole time. And Sheikh Mohammed was obviously a remarkable young man because he kept up, but he also shone in front of his sergeant and his captain who were marking his team the whole time.
Train hard, fight easy. You had to put them under pressure. The reason why he was created and given an appointment, because he had shown the capabilities of being a leader.
400 cadets were dropped into the middle of the Brecon Beacons, and they were given 1 hour. After 1 hour, there was 100 so-called enemy that were sent into there and hunted these cadets down. Their job was to go and hunt them down, capture them. At the end of this exercise, there was 2 platoons, 16 men out of 400 who hadn't been caught, and he led one of those platoons.
It became painfully obvious that he was a little different from most of the others because he had this attitude of being in charge.
These sort of people have a sort of charisma which burns out because you can feel power and you can feel radiance.
It all helps to sort of build your team.
Mohammed was made the leader for one particular phase of battle. A British cadet questioned something he did, and I remember distinctly he went over to this chap and he picked this chap up by his collar and said, "You will do what I effing well tell you to do." And of course we saw this and it was rather amusing.
He simply had to, because failure was not an option.
And he certainly did well.
Sheikh Mohammed said to Sergeant Major Benny, "I can hit that from 800 metres. And Sergeant Major Benny, who told me this himself, said, "Officer Cadet Rashid, that's absolute balderdash." Sheikh Mohammed picked up his rifle, boom, right in the middle.
had done one shot, zeroed his rifle, and put the next 5 in the same hole, virtually. I said to him, Mohammed, tell me, where did you learn to shoot like that? And he said, oh, my father was very strict with us.
And I find that these things you don't forget about.
They obviously saw talent in Sheikh Mohammed, which is either self-taught or perhaps his family.
Very soon showed his capabilities, and that's why he rose up in the system.
I interviewed a cadet called Charlie Wiggin, and Wiggin told me about one of these marches that they were forced to do. Now, if you didn't return, you were out. Charlie Wiggin was done. He was collapsing on the floor. Sheikh Mohammed saw him, stopped, went back, picked Wiggin up over his shoulders and dragged him back to camp and passed out of Mons successfully. But he wouldn't have done if Sheikh Mohammed hadn't picked him up that night. And there's one report which still exists that Sheikh Mohammed was the first back.
When you're marching sort of 10, 12 miles at night and you're carrying your full pack, as they called it in those days, and you get to that exhausting, and then you'll get hypothermia, and you can die.
You've got to have that backbone, but also the care and attention that goes with it into how to bring people along with you.
Towards the end, he was put in charge of the platoon.
Mohammed was the best officer cadet, but an overseas cadet had never been an under-officer at Mons. And I had to take the decision that I was going to make the first overseas cadet an under-officer, a senior under-officer. But then it was difficult. But I stood my ground, although I was the boss, so I had every right to stand. I stood my ground, and all the others said, but they were worried that this was not usual. Mohammed arrived in my office, saluted and did all the right stuff, stamped in front of my desk and stood there, and I said, Mohammed, I'm making you senior under-officer. A big, broad smile spread across his face.
It was an extraordinary achievement.
I was amazed by what he's achieved.
So well done him. These things have obviously stuck with him, you see.
Sheikh Mohammed was standing out of sync with the rest of Kohima Company, of which he was the senior under-officer. And Benny goes out onto the parade and shouts, "Officer Cadet Rashid, take 2 steps right." So instead of him shuffling 2 steps right, he shouts, "Kohima Company, 2 steps left." And the whole company moves towards Sheikh Mohammed, and then they were in sync. And Benny remembered this story 20, 30 years later, because it never happened before and it never happened after.
I had horses in the stables at Mons that I could ride and practice. And on this particular day, a member of the guard from the guard room came running into my office saying, "The horses are loose and the dog's pissed off." There was absolute chaos. The next thing I saw coming out of some trees, and it was Officer Cadet Mohammed. There he was, 2 horses, him in the middle, leading them very efficiently.
Well, his success has been entirely to his own efforts. Nothing, well, training to be an officer does help a bit, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
When these cadets came to Mons, they were the best of the best. They were the elite. They were going to be officers. But 30% failed. Yet he was this young man from Dubai who succeeded.
He proved himself to be well worthy of getting the commission which he was going to get at the end.
And the commandant of Mons said to Sheikh Rashid, "What next?" Sheikh Rashid turned to him and said, "Mohammed's coming home. He's going to keep us safe."
Sheikh Mohammed has proved that his father was a great man, but Sheikh Mohammed is a great, great man.
What he's done is a triumph.
Sheikh Mohammed is not the same as everybody else. That's why he's Sheikh Mohammed.